Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 98 Words of Nothing, coming to you on a beautiful Friday, January 6th, or 6th of January. And today we are joined by a special guest by a man named Vanugan, who has a YouTube channel, Bearded Individual.
Hello.
And of course, today with us, as always, is my co host, Roza.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so today we're talking about sexuality and gender identity under spirituality. I would go over how we got to this point, but for the sake of time and for my internet not to fuck up, we're just gonna straight jump right into it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess until I find the links I have on here that I posted on Polytheistic Theology, I thought you could go first, Roza.
Oh, yes. Then in my case, uh, yeah. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear
Hey,
you.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. No problem. In that case, let's start off. Gender and spirituality. So here's how it is. Given that I was raised in a Jewish family, I started out with a pretty Jewish conception of gender roles. Fact of the matter is, the Jewish religion is very gendered. And although this is most specifically and easily noticeable with the Orthodox community, it is even the case in a Reform community like ours that there are specific roles that men have to take and specific things that women have to do relative to one another. And ultimately, the act of growing up as a Jewish person is very much gendered. It's very much grounded in that. And um, whatever room there is for ambiguity is found uh, either in some obscure rulings in the Talmud, which don't generally get used in practice, or what is more common in the modern day, that Reform and conservative congregations will adapt Jewish practice to transgender and non-binary individuals in ways that they wouldn't have done previously. Ultimately, this is just how it is with a lot of religions anyway, where you'll have the more conservative branch, which refuses to change its strict gender roles, and then your more liberal branch, which is with it a bit to, get more inclusive and bring more people in.
Right.
Most of my life, I've not been really a practicing or believing Jew, and my relatively liberal understanding of gender roles, except for that they have maybe less understanding of gender concept than I do. So for the longest time, I just assumed, well, this is just a Bronze Age relic that I can leave behind. Um, but while reading Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State by Friedrich Engels, I learned a whole lot about the development of the patriarchal family. And one thing that I realized the is that during the time period when the Torah was originally being written, the patriarchal family was a relatively new. And this is interesting because it would imply then that whatever was going on prior to that was something different. And we don't know exactly what was different, but there does seem to be at least some scanty evidence that the pre-biblical social organization of the Canaanite people might have not anything to do with patriarchal family at all. And one of the remnants that we can find is the fact that Jewishness itself, the belonging to the tribe of Judah, is not something that passes down by father right. It's something that passes down by mother right. If your mother is a Jew, you are a Jew. And in considering this and taking that in together with what I read from Engels and what I read from Morgan, in this pre-biblical era, it might very well have been a mother right based society, a society where clan affiliation descends from the mother, and in that light, when I had this experience, this spiritual experience of speaking to the goddess Asherah, and she addressed herself to me as the ancestor, the ancient ancestor, the great grandmother of my great grandmothers. I kind of saw how that played in. You know, I saw how that made a lot of sense, and I felt as though the matriarch, I don't even want to say matriarchal really, but like matrilineal society of ancient time was kind of calling through millennia and millennia toward me. And I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
And yeah. And this isn't really specifically to do with Canaanite society, but definitely with Semitic society and the region associated. There are examples of evidence of transgender identity. I might have mentioned some of this stuff before to you. Like, for example, Enheduanna, who was the first ever author to sign her own name on her own work, Enheduanna. She was the daughter of the king Sargon of Akkad, and she was a priestess of the moon god Sin.
Hmm.
And Enheduanna had a very strong connection to the Sumerian goddess Inanna, and she said of Inanna that she is the one who makes the man dress as the woman and the one who makes the woman dress as the man. And she has this poem talking about the reciprocal relationship there, and I find that very interesting. And the other one that I found very interesting was the example of the Roman emperor, or maybe we should say empress, Elagabalus. Have you ever heard of Elagabalus?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
have.
Yes. No,
Elagabalus
I didn't
came
know her
from
name.
Yes, Elagabalus came from an Arabian family in the region of Roman Syria, I think, and was a priest of the god. The priest of the god Eleogabal, I think, was the name in Latin. And interestingly, Elagabalus was the first person to ever express a desire to have sexual reassignment surgery.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, said to all the doctors and surgeons in Rome, I will pay a very, very large sum to anyone who can, for me, reshape my genitalia. So there you go, first ever transgender Roman empress, and comes from the similar region. There's a very long-standing tradition of Galli, who are the priests of the goddess Cybele, and the Galli were the ones who, on the day of the festival, would ecstatically go into a trance and then self-castrate. Oh, crap. I think I self-castrated a little too hard right there. But in any case, self-castrate and then up in feminine clothing and become priests of the goddess Cybele, who is the mother goddess of Anatolia. So there's lots of ancient evidence. There's lots of ancient connections there, and it's all from the same region too. So 3,000 years in the past, I would have been some kind of a transgender priest of Asherah.
Nice. That's
Marvelous.
Yeah.
well, some of that information I just did not know. Like I knew there was a trans empress, I just never knew her name, and I also didn't know about the whole matrilineal lineage. That, well, I guess some levels I knew because that's how it originally started off, but I didn't know that by the time the Torah was written, the patriarchal system was still relatively new. I just didn't know that, which is
Yeah.
very fascinating. Oh, hold on. Excuse me, I've been having a cough lately. So I guess that's from your perspective. What about you, Vanugan?
Well, I have a strange spiritual background because I grew up Episcopalian,
Right.
and then I went to church.
All right, try again. You're Episcopalian church, and you want something about Pentecostal?
Yes. I grew up in the Episcopalian church, and for most of my childhood, and it was my first experience with any kind of spirituality was the very Episcopalian, uh, basically Catholic light experience that the Episcopalians offer. We have everything they have except I say we. They have everything that the Catholics have except confession.
Oh, do you have like a pope too?
We have the ecumenical, not ecumenical.
Interesting.
That it's we have a diocese, and they are just sort of the ones that are organized by state. It's very similar to the Anglican Church, but I digress. You get that kind of spirituality through an Episcopalian Christian, pretty conservative mindset, and then go to the Pentecostal one, where even the vague subject of sex is going to be basically taboo. Well, all of this is happening. I get the social end telling me no, or keep it quiet, or it don't even think about its existence. I have at home my mother, who has, even at her most conservative Christian times, still been a semi-druidic pagan witch whose entire relationship with sex is very open. It's very normal, very natural. Yes, you keep it in the bedroom and away from everyone as so as not to bother them, which is of course more just Christian conservatism, in my opinion. She's just very like, sex is normal. These things happen to our bodies. People want to have certain kinds of things happen to their bodies. And it's a very natural and important part of humanity to experience sexual pleasure. It's very normal. Why have it if it's not there?
That's a good point.
Or why not have it?
A very enlightened perspective.
It is. So, I
sorry.
Only thing I know about like the Episcopalian Church is that they're, at least today, somewhat queer affirming. Is that true?
They are. They're more and more open about homosexuality and basically other sexualities. With I'm pretty sure they're only beginning to pick up on transgender stuff. That's the thing is about a lot of Christian churches that are even accepting of gay people, is they're going to be about a step behind pretty consistently.
No.
Within the Christian churches, I have consistently found when it comes to social progress, they're about a step behind.
I see.
Some are faster than others, of course, but this is even with the progressive churches, this is pretty consistent, except for the Unitarian Universalists.
They're unique.
They're pretty with it. Yeah.
Yep. I also hear some pretty nice things about Quakers.
Quakers they've always been the better Puritans.
We actually have a Quaker in this server.
Nice.
They're not quite Puritans, but yes. They've always been the better English description. I've never heard of a German Quaker, though they may have been Dutch.
Well, the Dutch tend to be, or the Germans or whatever, tended to be Amish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
And they're more opposite end of Quakers in a way. All right, I guess if you don't have anything else to share, Vanugan, I guess it's my turn then.
I suppose I wasn't prepared.
Well, it was just we on the way. None of us were prepared. We're just going off in our head of what we've known growing up and how we've related to it as we've grown and what we know of our spiritual history and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's a strange Christianity is a strange religion.
It is very odd. So I guess I'll come from my end where I am right now with Ifa. Primarily with Ifa, not so much with the Dharma aspect of my faith. So it's just going to be the Ifa African oriented. So when it comes to like African and gender and sexuality, it varies heavily because Africa is a big ass continent with various peoples. So I'm going to be mainly focusing on the generalization in Yoruba because I think that would be much easier. So let's see, where was it? So one of the things I have up is Homosexuality Taboo with an Ifa, and this was written back in December 4th, 2019 by Awo Ifosola Sa, oh dear lord, Shango Balade. I'm, again, sorry if I mispronounced that. And basically what the article states, because it's just a review, is saying that within Ifa, sexuality is very vast, but the only two Odus, which are basically laws, and they're mixed Odus, so they're not even the part of the major 16, the original 16, but of the 256, doesn't really say anything against homosexuality, but really says, hey, if you want children, just have sex with the opposite sex. If you want children, you can have sex with the same sex. It ain't gonna work. You're gonna find something really not so well. But there was no like hardcore law that prevented people from having same-sex sexual relations or any form of punishment. If there was, it had to be region to region depending where you were within the Robandalan. When it comes to transgender issues, on the other hand, that was more accepted because the way the Yoruba saw gender was more spiritual energy. So, for example, it says, now I say the topic of transgender is actually all throughout Ifa. You'll find many instances of male Orisha becoming female and vice versa. For example, Obatala becoming the female Orishanala and getting pregnant. Aromila, who was a woman in some Odu, women initiated to Shango in Nigeria are addressed as males. Males dressed in dresses. All initiated Orisha are considered wives. Iwao. Male Oshun priests at times take on feminine roles. Really, gender roles were more flexible prior to introduction of Christianity and Islam to West Africa, so the word cisgender is not appropriate word to describe it. Some of the intolerant attitudes have indeed leaked into some of Ifa Odisha houses, but it's not from Ifa. So we can see from a transgender aspect of it, it was always accepted within Ifa because gender was more than what was between your legs. It was more about the energy you performed. Some aspects it was celebrated because it was shown that you were able to connect with the opposite gender much better than most other people. So we can see it being more flexible and open within that tradition, but there was no identification of cis or trans or even sexuality. You didn't really identify with it. It was just an action. These weren't identifications within Yoruba culture. This was actually all still quite new to them, I would say, yes, but I'm not really Yoruba, I'm New African. And the idea of sexuality in Ifa is, depending on what Ile or house you're a part of, some of them will not really do work with you because of your sexuality or your gender, and some of them will. Because at the end of the day, what Ifa really cares about is character and how you achieve your destiny. And some people have argued that sexuality isn't really character, it's just something innate. It's not really character. Character is something learned. Another post I have about Ifa psychology, the author of it, what's her name? Where is her name? Where is she? Oh yeah, here. Efemina Aletor. I mispronounced that. Eva says, whatever we perfect now will persist throughout lifetime. What does this mean? It means any attitude lifestyle that you practice and perfect is in this waking moment called now will continue to occur in your life as long as you live. Meaning, even when you reincarnate, such attitudes or lifestyle would continue to show up in your reality. This is how destiny is created. This is why you see that some people find it easy to display excellence while some find it difficult to do so. It is because one perfected his/hers and the other did not. So any lifestyle or you practice now, once you are able to perfect it, it will be difficult to do away with such lifestyle. Let's say, for instance, that you always practice ire, goodness, and you are able to perfect it. It will be difficult for you to engage in ibi, misfortune. because you would find it unpleasant. If you practice lesbianism and you are able to perfect it, you would find it difficult to make love to another gender because you would find it unpleasant. So back to gays and lesbians, in their past lives, they chose to practice and perfected homosexuality. So this is why when it comes naturally through them, in this present life, an Eshu, who is the trickster spirit and the spirit that delivers our prayers to Oludumare, granted their request because it is the covenant that whatever we desire would be manifested, be it good or bad. So Oludumare is playing his/her own part. As we all know, Oludumare is also genderless, so he can be considered a father or a mother. So sexuality, at least through this author says, is that it's something that we are to perfect. If we chose to be gay, because we have on our belief, we believe that we chose something prior to our life before we inhabit a body, that is our right, and we have to perfect it. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's just what it is. It's not bad, it's not good. It's only societal expectations that define it, whether it be bad or good. So again, it's very neutral when it comes to sexuality in Ifa. Now today, if you go to Nigeria and the Yoruba parts, or Benin or Togo, they're going to be more reactionary to sexuality and transgender issues because of the colonialization of Africa and all that. And whatever rules of law the English forced upon them, or the French forced upon them in order to, what's the word I'm looking for? Conform to their new social norms, because they thought whatever Africans practiced was of course backwards due to various reasons. And another thing I have here, I'm going to upload this to the voice chat and give y'all this at least in live recording, is a blog spot post called The Myth of African Homosexuality. Now this one covers Africa as a whole, but it's a generalization. So if you want to get like the specifics, you're going to have to do your own research, but this is what it says in the whole. I'm going to read key aspects of this. So at first it talks about the anti-gay bill that was happening throughout Uganda. And it's ironic because one of the kings of Uganda that would throw out Christian missionaries was a gay king. Let's see here. Where is he? Popular logic here often decries homosexuality as a Western concept and just another import from colonial days. Pressure from the West to give LGBT citizens rights is often seen as further coercion from a former colonialist, trying once again to control the African agenda. Recently, Uganda's president, Museveni, sharply rebuffed Obama for his comment that Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill could complicate relations, asking him to respect the difference in African culture. This delighted numerous Ugandans who saw their president as standing up for their sovereign rights in the African state. Yet the history of homosexuality in Africa is far more nuanced than the current debate lets on, with numerous studies showing that homosexuality is in fact as African as the soil itself. In the Buganda Kingdom of Uganda, Mwanga II, the Kobaka king in their language, of the region was openly gay. Mwanga actually battled the attitudes of early missionaries towards homosexuality, sometimes even killing Christians who dared question his sexuality. And although Ugandan children are rarely taught this when they learn their history of Buganda, it has been an open secret for years. In northern Uganda, Nitiko Lango tribes allowed men to shift their gender status, rendering them freely to marry other men. So we see here another aspect of transgender and sexual fluidity within East Africa in Uganda, a place that is notoriously homophobic thanks to English indoctrination from Christianity. So we can see here how when it comes to sexuality, again, through different cultures and how it was colonized, it's been reinforced that this is wrong, and now they have the mindset this was always wrong. So when the dominant or the former colonialist culture realizes what they were preaching was wrong, or what they were saying was wrong, and scientific evidence advances that this is just natural, it's harder for the former colonized states to believe them because they are already told once what they practiced was wrong and backwards. So why should they listen to them again? And it's very frustrating because in a sense, I can sympathize with that, because if you're told something that was wrong before, being told again by the same people that basically robbed you of your land, your resources, and your self-determination for generations, why should you listen to them again? Why not have this skepticism? And that's fine, and to an extent that's fine. But when it comes to science, science transcends borders. It transcends culture. It's something that's objectively true no matter what. So whenever I talk to some people, like that idiot I talked to on Reddit, who told me to stop the cap that trans women are women, he may believe that trans women aren't women, but objectively speaking, in the scientific field, given how the bodies transform once you take estrogen, or when women take testosterone, their body transforms to basically that of the opposite sex. Yes, they might not have started off with the opposite sex, but they're still transitioned to that, to the point where they basically are what they identify with. So it's part of that has to do with scientific illiteracy, and part of it has to do with people just not wanting to let go of what they've been taught throughout their lives being challenged, because it's part of the ego to protect what they've been taught in order to maintain their worldview and to feel safe. Because once we are taught that something we once learned is not true, we have this fear of, we don't really know the world we are in. We're at the throes of nature. We are fragile. And so people like that are going to maintain whatever quote unquote truth they've known in order to basically keep their worldview intact and not be scared anymore, which is an issue, but it will be fixed over time. In the book Boy Wives and Female Husbands, edited by Stephen Murray and Will Rasco, a study of the Biafra people in Cameroon notes homosexuality being quite normal when women had reached puberty. Out of fear of impregnating girls before full maturity could take place, boys often took up boyfriends, and it was suspected that women did likewise. Those that never married and stayed with their own sex were simply termed as those without children. So again, back in West Africa and Cameroon, this was normalized. This was nothing to be ashamed of. But what about in the southern half of Africa? In Lesotho, lesbian behavior was well known. It existed without the social construction of what lesbian means. Because traditionally, the African family always needed to produce offspring, lesbian relationships rarely formed with the intention of a permanent pairing. Rather, affections or sexuality existed side by side with the concept of marriage to a man. This is later echoed in the Hausa tribes of West Africa, where there was not a necessary connection between marriage and heterosexual desire. So from this, we can tell that it was okay to have these feelings, but you still need to produce, offspring, but you could still have these feelings. So again, we see like a loophole of, it's okay to be gay, but hey, could you at least give us some children first? You can still enact on this, but at least give us some children first, which made sense during the time where people didn't really live that long. And this is why many people had a lot of children back in the day, because we didn't have much of the medicine we had today to prevent diseases and all that. Hence why it was important to have children, to carry on your name, to help with this tribal or even urban society that was setting up, so they could have like farm hands and other guilds and all that. Continuing, it says, it is worth noting that that the African continent is incredibly large and diverse with thousands of languages and cultures. So when we discuss homosexuality in pre-colonial Africa, we must take into consideration oral histories and cultural concepts which shift over time. Yet there is a very clear divide between pre-colonial attitudes on sexuality and post-colonial law. Current popular opinion may prefer the erasure of Africa's homosexual past, deeming it a sin, an abnormality, or simply un-African. But the reality is, Africa has always had a gay community, and regardless of current discriminatory measures, it always will. So we can see that even despite this, Africa has a rich history, again, with gender fluidity and sexuality. I'm going to upload oh, fuck you, Discord. Come on, just work with me. I'm going to try to upload another link here that talks about transgender and specifically Yoruba culture once more. And after this, I'll stop talking.
I would like to interject while Discord is refusing not to work with you.
Yeah,
and just mention the fact that in that same line, that article, either you mentioned the history or the article mentioned it, was that it's okay to be gay, just give us some children first, is actually another thing that sort of links into the fact as to why so many societies were matrilineal, because anybody can be the father, but the mother is obvious.
Right. Like, yeah, that's how come, like, West African or Niger Congo specifically had a matrilineal line, whether or not, like, men and women were equal, depending on which culture you're dealing with. But women kind of had equal footing, or at least more respect, because you always know who the mother was. The mother was the birth giver. She took care of the children. She deserved more respect. And that's how come, again, she had somewhat, in some aspects of Niger Congo culture, more equal footing to the man.
Yes.
All right, so I DM'd you the link. I hate Discord. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I put it in the chat.
Thank you.
If Rosa wants to open it.
All right, so here is the transgender aspect, and I'm going to read key parts of this article. So I'm going to start here. Read these two paragraphs. Quote, gender or sexual expression is influenced by culture, which is fluid, in the sense that as the way of life of particular groups of persons are influenced, so is their perception and reaction to things around them. Which also change with time. These influences can be in the form of cultural domination or subjugation, religious ideology, etc. Africa has a diverse form of gender and sexual expression, and in the Yoruba tradition, belief in particular gender and sexual expression is fluid, as the manifestation of gender can either take the course of a male or female, even in the same person. So, again, like the Orisha, humans have the ability to transition socially, at least at the time, because there was no real surgery or ways to physically transition yet to their social opposite. Most opponents of LGBT rights use culture to jettison the idea of respect for the protection of rights of LGBT persons, as the normal cliche is, quote, it's never part of our culture, end quote. Further, most also oppose LGBT rights based on lack of limited knowledge on LGBTI issues. Hence, when they are probed about these issues, they lack answers to such questions, or when they struggle to utter any answers, such are tainted with sentiments that lack basis. Which is, again, if you ever talk to someone who is not scientifically literate about trans issues, or how trans women are indeed women, especially when they transition, they're gonna mainly fall back on the default of what they learned in grade school about boy and girl, and they thought this can never happen, this can never transition, because they don't have the scientific knowledge of that. They don't have the access to that, and sometimes they're not really willing to look into it because they themselves have a innate bias that they don't want to give up. So, of course, the author of this article explains that transgender is simple means of a stated person's gender identity. It's just a social construct. Gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of being, male, female, or something else. Gender expression refers to the way a person communicates gender identity to others through behavior, clothing, hairstyles, voice, or body characteristics. Note that gender is social and a cultural construct, hence it's fluid, as earlier discussed in the introduction, so the issue of expression of gender is also influenced by the same factors as culture. So when it comes to the gender expression within Yoruba tradition, Yoruba gender construction has always been fluid and is modulated by other factors such as seniority, which is age, because we have a very, what's the word, I forgot the word. Basically, major respect to elders. Personal achievements, wealth, knowledge, and acquisitions. Although gender is fluid, Yoruba traditional culture, in their users' language, gender is limited to a binary, male and female. It is worthy to note that binary usage of gender is not only limited to humans, but also includes expressions in cosmos. So that's another thing. The Yoruba tradition is very binary. We work with numbers and all that shit. Hence, while some terms like non-binary may not make sense to us, or it does to me at least because I grew up in a different culture with different language, it doesn't really make sense in the original Yoruba. This is why I kind of fell into this whole gender neutral category, because I identify not really as non-binary, but gender neutral, because I acknowledge I have female and male aspects within myself that's not really 100% one or the other. So I'm like very comfortable with being gender neutral instead of non-binary. This does not, of course, discredit non-binary people, but within Yoruba tradition, you have to understand language-wise, it just doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean it cannot exist. It's just for right now, it doesn't make sense until we have a better understanding as time goes on. Gender non-conforming
I guess in that sense,
you're saying?
you stand at a kind of vanguard position of gender, because you are expressing yourself in a new way, in a way that you're essentially building it as you go.
Right. Gender non-conforming expression in Yoruba culture does not necessarily mean that the person needs to forego any of the social constructions linked to their biological sex, but assuming the gender role of male or female, depending on circumstances, this is more evident in expressions like Oben bi akun, is that an R? The highlighting makes this worse. Oburen bi akuren, meaning a woman behaving like a man, which is not a praise, but more implying that the feat undertaking by the female is more of a male role than that of a female, and shows how gender expression in Yoruba traditional setting can be fluid and not restrictive. So again, in Yoruba culture, women had really equal footing to men. There were some aspects that were still patriarchal and more favorite men, and some aspects that are matriarchal and favorite women, but at the end of the day, they had equal footing. Like, for instance, women could divorce their husbands in Yoruba culture and take what they have and move back to their own clan area. That was pretty, I guess, compared to certain European cultures, excluding the Nordics, because I know Nordic women could also divorce their husbands, was very progressive compared to like what we've originally would think of Africans. Because we're also taught that they're always backwards and reactionary. This just isn't true. There are aspects of them that were more progressive today than or aspects that we today would consider progressive for their time. Careful look at the gender expression in Yoruba tradition, one will note that in diverse settings, gender nonconforming is never frowned upon, as feats and roles played by opposite genders in contrast to their sex is appreciated and applauded. So again, to have the opposite gender identity or aspect, not identity, because there's no identity with that, to act like the opposite of your sex or your gender was seen as a great feat, because that means you're gifted of understanding how the other gender felt and the other sex felt. That was a blessing to have. That means you weren't restricted. It means you were more open. Sadly, again, this was taken away from us. And we have the aspect of we always have to act like men, or we also have to act like women. And I guess this is why, in some aspects, again, when it comes to African American women, white people also like to make fun of them, saying they act more like men. It's because, well, in our culture and our heritage, one, we always had equal footing with men, for one. Women always had equal footing with men. And that was always passed down, no matter what. And two, and this is where I'm going to get more spiritual in this aspect, so this isn't scientific, so if you're more of the scientific background, feel free to forgo this. And I forgo this as well when it comes to scientific research. But in a spiritual sense, of course, they're also masculine, because we were blessed with that, of being more open. It was the colonizers, the people that forced us to adapt something foreign, to act in a restricted way that hurts, and just basically was not, we were not used to. So, of course, black women are still going to act some ways masculine, what they consider masculine, because that was always natural to them, to us. And black men are still going to act feminine, even though that's more shamed upon. It's getting better today. It's getting better. It was always natural to us because that was our gift, was to understand the other gender if we were blessed that way. So, we are not sorry for acting outside of your perception. If that you had an issue with that, that was a you issue. Our people already knew what to do. Your people didn't. And now, since you've basically tried to erase it, and now you're pretending to care about what queer people in Africa are facing, and some of them might be legitimate, but some of them kind of do it for not for honest reasons.
Clout.
Yeah, clout. You don't care how the queer people in Africa are treated. You've shamed that out of us. So, of course, the Africans are going to have a reactionary view now to sexuality that isn't patriarchal. Of course, you're going to have people like that president that they name. You're going to have idiots like Chappelle. You're going to have idiots like Dr. Umar preaching a reactionary stance that basically even hurts women too. Because you shame that out of us, and now you try to force us to adapt a white patriarchal stance that we in the black community are still facing. Because with issues such as Hotep and Nation of Islam and 3%ers and all those other morons that want to copy white patriarchal standards has kind of hurt the black community, set us back in a way. But we will still fight against that. We're still fighting against the contradictions between the colonizer and colonizer to make it more equal. And we're also fighting against patriarchy, both within the Yankee concession view and the patriarchy some of the ignorant Negroes want to recreate, but for black people. Moving on. The above have tried to examine gender expression in its fluidity in Yoruba tradition. It's also important that we examine gender identity within the same context. The issue of gender identity within Yoruba traditional can be more understood through a careful examination of life of a character, emotion. Is emotion the rainbow? Or no, this is not. So this talks about... this is just a story of emotion. I don't know. How far are we on in this recording? Over 49 minutes? I think we can continue because there's going to be a lot of things I need to cut out due to the internet fucking up. So, do you guys want to read this story?
What's the story?
Emotion. It's literally right there. It's not that long.
Oh, it's in the article.
Yeah.
I see.
According to history, emotion, that's the one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. According to history, Omosun is the second child of the 21st Alafin of Oyo.
Oh, yeah.
After the death of the firstborn, she wanted to be according the same rights as privilege as first child, not even minding the gender. While her story might be waved away by some as women emancipation, it will be helpful to note that whatever she wanted was not just being given a mere privilege as the first child, since the one before her is dead, but she wanted to be regarded as a man. And critically, looking at the scant history about her will help to expand more on this. Omosun is regarded as although a female was of a masculine character, and she considers the right and privileges of the Aremu crown prince her own. To better understand the issue of gender identity here, it is good to understand the role of the Aremu in Yoruba tradition. The Aremu was usually the Alafin's eldest son, and until 1730 he regularly succeeded his father. From then on, he was expected to commit suicide on his father's death, a practice that was followed until the 1850s. The Aremu at times shared a good deal of his father's power, but was not subject to the same ritual restrictions. With the knowledge about the power the Aremu wields, it will be a misnomer for a person who did not see herself as a man to aspire for such a title, as in the case of Omosun. Omosun devised a murderous plot to get what she said rightfully belongs to her. When her father, Osinyago, adopted Odwala, his cousin, as the Aremu, Omosun resented the appointment, not because she prefers another person for that title, but because she wanted that as her own. The appointment of a new Asin provided the opportunity for Omosun to carry out her plans. A dispute arose between Omosun and Woruwale as to the right of appointing a new Asin, and Woruwale made the appointment without a recourse to her. Omosun felt her pride as the real Aremu was insulted by a mere commoner. In the heat of passion, she slew Woruwale. This account, like earlier stated, is not about women emancipation, but more the issue of a person inner feeling who they are. In this case, Omosun, although not being called a male, having the inner feeling of not a female, but rather a male, and demanding all the rights and privileges of a male. Remember that she was being described as, although a female, was of a masculine character.
So we see here the social transitioning of a dollar to a man. This is the closest thing to, I guess, within Yoruba culture of us getting a trans, like, royal. A well-known trans royal, which is still pretty cool. And I'm glad we read this or went over this and talked about this today, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while now, and how spirituality affects gender. That's part of the reason why I joined IFA, was because the gender creativity of the Orisha and how humans are free to do that is what brought me here to this faith. It's something that makes me feel good about myself. Because back when I was an Orthodox Christian, I always felt ashamed or bad for basically feeling some form of queer or even bisexual. Even though I had friends or a friend in the church who knew what I felt, how I felt, and he didn't shame me. He says there was nothing wrong with that. He, of course, moved back in 2019 to DC, so I haven't been able to talk to him since. But yeah, I guess this will end it here. It's been 54 minutes. It's going to be a lot shorter because, again, given how my internet, if the audio sounds choppy, I do apologize. We might come back to this topic in the future. And
Oh, yeah, certainly.
yeah, come back to this topic in the future. Hopefully the audio and the internet will be much clearer. If you've gotten through this, I thank you. And I would like to thank Vanugan for showing up and joining us.
Yes, it was a good time. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And I guess that'll be it. Any last words you two want to say?
No. Goodbye.
Anything you want to say, Rosa? Oh, she's muted. I'm guessing she doesn't need to say anything. Is there?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't see the button. I was just gonna say, I like how the talk went. I'm happy about it.
That's good.
All right. Happy trails.
All right.
Yeah.
This is 98 Words of Nothing. Wishing you a happy new year, by the way. And I hope 2023 becomes something good happens in 2023. Of course, bad things will happen, but like every rainy day, there's always a sunshine and rainbow coming next. This is 98 Words of Nothing, signing off.